photograph from 1883 that shows men of the 10th Infantry lined up on this parade ground, tourists on the hill over there watching them. There still are tourists up there today watching us. So not that much really has changed. But again, with these dress parades, one of the first things they would be going through is a roll call. Desertion was a bit of a crisis in the 1880s, and even with Fort Mackinac being a more peaceful and relaxed post, it still was a problem here. So you want those regularly scheduled roll calls to be done. And just like anything else in the U.S. military, it's a very set process to go through this. Squad attention, carry, arms, support, arms. They move their weapon up to the support, so it's in the crook of their left arm. When their name is called, they shout here and move their weapon back down to order arms. This is being done so for every name called, an officer can see a rifle move. So if you've noticed one of your buddies is absent, you can't call in their stead because, again, a spare gun can't be moved. But on top of that, NCOs, so your sergeants, corporals, and first sergeants, we're all instructed to learn the sound of the voices of the men in the company to make sure that the ones saying here are genuinely the correct people. But we'll go through this process very quickly. Art Miranda, here. Art Gillespie, here. Art Sharp, here. Art Phelps, here. Fantastic. Our entire garrison of 4 men accounted for. At this point, they then go into a weapons inspection. The first part of that is to fix bayonets. Bayonets, while they are still being issued in the 1880s, really aren't all that useful anymore. They're oftentimes being abandoned before going on campaign, but they were still around for garrison usage. Order, arms. But when you're inspecting an entire company, so upwards of 50 men or so, going through and inspecting all their weapons individually would take a good bit of time. So often, if your regimental band was present, they'd be playing music throughout this whole process. In lieu of that, like in Fort Mackinac's case, a bugler might be playing a tune during the inspection process, but I have a feeling our inspection today will not take quite so long, so we don't have to deal with that. Inspection, arms. So they walk in front of each soldier, they will move their weapon up here and put the hammer on the half-cocked position. If I want to, I can take the weapon from them and check it, but since I've got a rifle in my hands, I'm going to be too lazy for that. Fantastic, they're all great. So, from this point, that they would then oftentimes, with actually more mundane things being done, have a bugler play the adjutant's call, which is the symbol for all the officers to come out and complete the inspection, including the fort's commandant and the senior-most officer. And as an officer, they are entitled to a salute from the entire garrison. Come on, carry, arms. Present, arms. Carry, arms. Order, arms. Parade, rest. So with the commandant out, at this point they've freed off any general orders that ought to be issued to the men while they're all in one spot. These could be Army-wide initiatives coming from the top of the chain of command directly from either the Secretary of War, perhaps even the President himself, or they could be more localized orders coming from the actual commandant at the garrison level. An example of one of these larger scale orders in August of 1885, the passing of President Grant, the War Department issued out orders of how to handle the funeral services at every post across the country. But for a more local order, by the end of the 1880s, the Commandant, Captain Greenleaf Goodale, issued a general order to tell the men to stop urinating in the piles of ash behind the barracks. So, they're pretty varied in their scope. But with all those general orders read out, no matter how mundane or how important, oftentimes drill would then follow. So the manual of arms, the different ways you're carrying your weapon, all the men should be doing the same thing at the same time. It's a very easy way to look at the discipline status of a unit by how well they conduct themselves through this. Because again, you have tourists watching, oftentimes the Army wants to show off a little bit. So we're going to go through just a few of the different motions of the manual of arms. What they're all standing at right now is the parade rest. It's a fairly comfortable way of standing. You are still stuck in one spot as if on parade, which is in contrast to something like in place rest. So the in place rest, as long as one of your feet remains in line or in place, you can do literally whatever you want. Technically speaking, up to and including laying down. But of course, the more relaxed you get, the harder it is when you get the command, squad attention, and you snap right back up to attention. Carry, arms. So the carry is the basic carry of your weapon, so it's close and tight to the body, so ideal for marching in close order. But it's also a default position, so you'll normally revert back to the carry between different things. All right. So the right shoulder, this is used oftentimes in inspections and parade and ceremonies because it looks very clean and militaristic. But this was also used for going into double time. If you're ever given the order on the double, you automatically throw your weapon up onto your shoulder before starting at a light jog. So it's up and out of the way, it's not going to snag on anyone's gear. Carry, arms. Again, back to the carry. Support, arms. As we did before, support moves the weapon out of your right arm and into the crook of your left arm. This is probably the most comfort you can try to squeeze out of a rifle that's 9 pounds. So if you are on a long shift of guard duty or a long march, being able to move your weapon out of your right arm where it is for most of the time and into your left gives you a little bit of relaxation and makes it just a bit more comfortable. Carry, arms. Order, arms. But all these positions usually are between 2 to 3 sub-steps to get from point A to point B. And for purpose of instruction and practice, they'd oftentimes truncate it down to drill by the numbers, or pausing at each individual step. So you can clearly see that everyone's doing the same thing. So we're going to run through those exact same motions, but now drill by the numbers. Squad by the numbers. Carry, arms. 2, 3, right shoulder, arms. 2, 3, carry, arms. 2, 3, support, arms. 2, 3, carry, arms. 2, 3, order, arms. 2. I'm in minute progress. What do you think, folks? Did they pass inspection today? Fantastic. We get to have a day where we fail inspection. But the rifles we have been drilling with, this is the same rifles that they would have had up here at Fort Mackinac in the 1880s, that being the Springfield 4570. This was a standard issue weapon of the day, had been since 1873, and would be up until 1892 when it was replaced. And during that time, this was a very significant weapon because it was the Army's first standard issue breech loading rifle. So standard issue meaning every soldier's getting it, breech loading meaning it loads at the back or the breech end of the rifle. So unlike soldiers in the Civil War, you're not loading a paper cartridge in the front or muzzle end, you're not having to use a ramrod or anything. This might look like a ramrod, but this is literally just for cleaning. The whole loading process happens now exclusively, again, at the rear of the weapon. To load it, you simply pull back on the hammer, flip open the rising breech block, and insert a pretty modern looking brass 4570 cartridge. If it was a live round, which obviously it's not, there would be a 45 caliber bullet on the end, about 500 grains, so an ounce or so in weight. But 70 grains of black powder, nevertheless, inside of the cartridge, and a center fire primer in the rear. You slip that into the breech, shut the breech block, and pull the hammer back another time, and you'll be ready to fire. So it's a pretty simple loading process, and it's vastly superior to those old muzzle-loading muskets from the Civil War. A soldier in the 1860s could expect to maybe fire 2 or 3 aim shots per minute, which is in contrast, again, to a soldier of the 1870s and 80s, where with this weapon you could achieve rates of fire of upwards of 10 to 15 aim shots per minute, which is a massive upgrade. But on top of that, this is also much more accurate of a weapon. Those older muzzle-loading muskets, because you're having to deal with loading at the muzzle, for a whole host of reasons, were nowhere near as accurate. Even though most of the weapons in the Civil War were still rifled, so they have the rifling where the grooves spiral down the interior of your barrel, leaving your bullet a spin to improve its accuracy, they still were really incredibly limited past about 300 yards or so. Again, by comparison, this weapon, again, is a significant upgrade. The Army considered the 4570 have a maximum effective range of about 1,200 yards. So it is an incredible increase. But of course, if you're ever firing your rifles in your dress uniform, range and accuracy does not matter because you're just doing things for ceremony. Typically speaking, whenever you see people do 21 gun salutes, they're not actually shooting bullets at all. Those are just blanks. But with that being said, at the end of one of these dress parades, the men would be dismissed. The bugler would remain behind with the officers to play retreat. The flag would be lowered. From the very last note of retreat, the guard detail would fire off a blank charge from their cannon to mark the end of the soldiers' working day. Now, granted, our working day is not done. The fort remains open for many, many hours. We're not going to bother with the flag or with the cannon, but I'm going to use this as an excuse to make lots of noise anyways with our rifles. So while we're, again, going to be firing blanks for obvious reasons, they will still be fairly loud, which is why all of my coworkers here put in their historically inaccurate bright orange foam earplugs already. But we're going to be doing a few different types of firing. One will be a volley, so we're all going to fire off at once. But the volley has the main disadvantage of after you fire, are now all empty. So oftentimes they'd fire by file. Successively, each person down the line aims and fires his weapon, so you're stagnating out the fire, so that at any given time, usually someone is loaded, so you have more of a rapid, regular rate of fire. So we'll be firing again, a decent amount of rounds out here. I do recommend you plug your ears. This will be fairly loud, but we'll get to step back and start this in just a moment. Come on, attention. Very easy. About face. Forward. Mark. Left wheel. Mark. Forward. Mark. Squad. Help. About face. Load. Fire squad. Right. Aim. Fire. Go. Fire by file. Ready? Fire. Fire. Carry. Mark. Mark. Work. Breaker. Mark. Hope that was loud enough for everyone. A much more impressive rate of fire than you're seeing being done in the 1860s. If you want to get a closer look at these weapons or ask any questions, they are all original rifles, so feel free to come down here at the parade ground. They're all about 140 years old. Otherwise, if you want to learn more about the civilians, and specifically the women who called Fort Mackinac home in the 1880s, our women at Fort Mackinac walking tour will be starting with me over here on this side of the parade ground in however long it takes me to walk over there. So feel free to join me for that. But no matter where you go, thank you folks, and a fantastic rest of your time here at Fort Mackinac today.